Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I am a digital marketer in life sciences. And today, my guest is Dr. Christopher DUMA. Dr. DUMA is he is a neurosurgeon. He's board certified, and he's pioneering innovative treatments for neurodegenerative diseases at Regeneration Biomedical. And so, with that, welcome, Dr. DUMA. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you very much, Don. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And so I like to start these shows oftentimes with just a little journey in your past life to sort of point to what is it that brought you to neurosurgery, and especially, where you're at right now with Regeneration Biomedical.
Right. So, Don, I was one of those kids who went to the doctor's office and saw him use a stethoscope on me, and I said, "Wow, that's pretty cool. I've got to be a doctor." So, honestly, I've been interested in medicine since I was age 9, I think. Moved on, became a neurosciences major in college because I thought that the brain and the way the brain worked and the spinal cord and the whole thing was the most fascinating part of the human body. From the neurosciences major, that was at Colgate University. And then I went on to medical school. So I was obviously, the guy who was pre-med, and everybody thought I'd go into neurology, medical neurology. But when I got into medical school, it was all about surgery for me. There are two types of doctors. One is the medical doctors and the others are the surgeons. And we each have different personalities, and I'm certainly the surgical personality. Thought neurosurgery was the greatest thing since sliced bread. So went into that, got a residency at Georgetown University. So I did my neurosurgical training at Georgetown, spent 7 years there. I did 1 year fellowship in something called stereotactic and functional neurosurgery. That was at University of Pittsburgh. Spent 1 year doing that. That was actually during my residency. And voila, I'm out as a practicing neurosurgeon doing exactly what I wanted to do. So started out here in California. Why California? And I always say for the weather. But it's, growing up in Manhattan, a little different. So that's how my career started out here.
And then what was it that led you to Regeneration Biomedical as well? What made you interested in that?
So my interest is, well, first of all, my current position, my day job is I'm the medical director of the brain tumor program at Hoag Hospital in Newport Beach. It's a private hospital with a very academic flair to it. And that's my day job. I also run the functional movement disorder program here, where we, put deep brain stimulators into the brain for Parkinson's disease, for movement disorders, for tremor, etc. I use focused ultrasound for that. I use deep brain stimulation for that. And I have been here at Hoag for more than 2 decades. And over this time, I see patients coming through my office with Alzheimer's disease, with progressive multiple sclerosis, with ALS, with traumatic brain injury from, say, football injuries, et cetera. And we have absolutely nothing to offer these patients. And nothing's really changed in 20, 30 years of treating these patients. Yes, we have 2 brand new drugs that are out on the market for Alzheimer's disease, which we can get into. But are they really addressing the problem? And again, I'll get into my philosophy on that as we go forward. But for all of these neurodegenerative diseases, we really basically have had no progress in the field of pharmaceuticals, the pharmaceutical industry, big pharma, et cetera, for more than 20 years. I said, with these diseases, there's so many things going on. Let's take Alzheimer's disease, for example. There's oxidative stress, there's lipid storage problems, there's protein misfolding problems, there's this problem, there's that problem, there's transport across cell membrane problem. There's so many problems. You could develop a monoclonal antibody or a drug to fix one of those problems, but you're not going to fix the whole situation. And when I give my talks on this topic, uh, to people interested in it and to the investors. I use this analogy of a refrigerator. If you have a refrigerator in your house and it's broken, it's not working, and you put your food is in there and it's spoiling, does it make sense to just keep removing the spoiled food? No, you have to fix the refrigerator. And for all of these neurodegenerative diseases, that's kind of my philosophy. We've got to fix the refrigerator from the inside out. And there is really, theoretically, hypothetically, only one thing that can do that, and that's a stem cell.
Mm.
Uh, I'm never been a little big proponent of stem cells way back when. It has kind of a sordid history, snake oil, and rogue stem cell clinics around the world, things like that give stem cells a bad name. But it is something that really needs to be addressed, needs to be looked at. So I decided to go the route of the FDA. I mean, how else can you legitimize what you're doing with stem cells unless you go through the FDA, to be quite honest with you? And the FDA has been begging for that because all of these other clinics are just doing it on their own. So my idea was to use stem cells directly injected into the brain for Alzheimer's disease. Now, why would I inject them into the brain directly? That's one question. Remember, I'm a neurosurgeon, so shooting things into the brain, not a big problem for me. How to do it? How would you inject into the brain? And what are you trying to accomplish when you inject stem cells into the brain? So if you're interested, I'll go through all of those.
Yeah, we'll definitely dive into that. I do want to sort of come back to like your journey though as well, and just talk a little bit about your interest in neurosurgery. Um, especially what were some of the key milestones that led you, down your path. And I kind of think
Right.
about our journey here or our discussion here. Oftentimes gets picked up by a variety of people, right? So you definitely investors, are ones that I know people, audience members have said, hey, look, we've invested in companies that have been on and been interviewed, here on the show, which I think is phenomenal. But secondly, I constantly am asked from people that are early in their career as well. And so to me, these stories are really, really interesting as well to try and help you unveil.
Delighted. I get that 100%. There's a local high school here, a public high school, Newport Harbor High, and I've been a mentor for students for the last 16 years there. Every year, I get a new student who rotates with me for an entire year. So these experiences are extremely important. I had one of those experiences when I was 16. I was in my first neurosurgical operating room at 16. That came through my high school at the time. But when I got into medical school, I just had uh, one attending, one neurosurgeon who, we just clicked. I thought what he was doing was the most amazing stuff in the whole world. And it was only a 2-week rotation, but my experience with him, my exposure to the operating room, my exposure to the patient population was just extraordinary. I mean, and this guy was so slick in the operating room. He was so talented, and he served as a role model for me going forward. And from that point on, it was neurosurgery all the way. So there was no two ways about it. I was hook, line, and sinker. So that's the very beginning.
Very good. Yeah, and I think the same thing. I mean, I go back to both people that were teachers in the high school that I was in and mentors that I've had along the way. All are so important in your overall journey. Let's talk a little bit about the technology and some of the things that have happened, in the neurosurgery space, and how the most significant achievements, might be impacting things as well. So you have experience in gamma knife radiosurgery and brain tumor surgery. Can you share a little bit of, your experience with some of the most significant achievements in these fields.
Absolutely. Well, to really age myself, you're not going to believe this, but when I was in residency at Georgetown, we had gotten one of the first MRIs in the whole, in the country. So it was being developed at that time, MRIs. So now you have an MRI on every street corner. But you're absolutely right. The way my brain works is that there's got to be a better way of doing something, or let me think of how to do this instead of read it out of a book. Uh, you have to, embrace the past and you have to embrace history, but you got to move on. I was lucky enough to get a paper accepted at a national meeting. It was in Seattle, Washington. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was a Congress of Neurologic Surgeons meeting. And there was this guy up on stage presenting their first year experience with something called the gamma knife,
Hmm.
which is a piece of equipment that looks like an MRI, but it actually shoots beams of radiation into a tumor in the brain or onto an arteriovenous malformation or what have you without opening the skull. So, so there's no surgical opening, yet we're treating a tumor as if it were surgery using stereotactic coordinates, using 3D coordinates, and using all sorts of computer assistance. But we are not opening the skull, and it's done as an outpatient. And I said, and this was in 1994, 1995. I said, we're not going to be doing open brain surgeries in the future. I better get on this. And that's where I got interested in Gamma Knife, and I actually went to my chairman at the Department of Neurosurgery at Georgetown. I said, "Can I do a fellowship in this, you know, Gamma Knife thing?" He goes, "If you can get it, do it." And I actually happened to be invited to do it, and I went up to interview and the whole thing, and they took me. So I thank Dade Lunsford. Dade Lunsford was the professor and chairman of that program. Uh, Dr. Janetta ran the program there at Pittsburgh, and I have them all to thank for where I am today in terms of where Gamma Knife is. But right now, I've done more than 8,000 Gamma Knife cases.
Wow. That's amazing. But the what about other technologies? I mean, are there other technologies that are being used? I know you and I were talking prior to going live, about the just limited use for robotic surgery. But I'm just curious about, kind of the future for other technologies as well.
Well, I think the latest technology that's just come out, which is also what I specialize in, is deep brain stimulation. I mean, it's been around a lot longer than what Elon Musk is doing, right? But it is a similar concept. We're putting electrodes into the brain. I mean, I happen to have an electrode right here. Electrodes this thin go into the brain, and they're hooked up to a pacemaker, like a heart pacemaker that gets put in the chest, and we can stimulate certain areas of the brain, certain nuclei in the brain, to stop a tremor or to loosen a patient's stiffness and rigidity, et cetera. So the latest innovations there are, uh, for example, Boston Scientific Abbott just came out with a device that is actually programmable over the internet. Okay, so you can be in Alaska and your doctor is in California and they can program you. The other iteration is from Medtronic. Medtronic has a device which actually is pretty much the first artificial intelligently operated machine where it picks up your brain waves, certain patterns in your brain, and then adjusts itself, the stimulation, to adjust to that particular brain wave. So that is out and that is now FDA cleared. It actually just cleared about 3 months ago. So
Wow.
we're using that now, and everybody's very excited about that. So that's the closest we have to something that's robotically, artificially intelligent. As far as physical robotics in the operating room, I mentioned to you earlier, it would slow me down, but the robotics that we have are quite accurate. They're quite good. We usually use them for just biopsies, but
Mm.
not for actual surgical removal of a tumor. So we can go in robotically, direct a probe to an area, take a piece of tumor with it, and come out. And that's basically as far as we've gotten.
Amazing.
Yeah,
S-
it's been a ride. It's been quite a ride over 20, 25 years.
So let's talk about your involvement in research, and particularly in gene therapy and immunotherapy. Um, how did that shape your approach to neurosurgery?
Right. So you mentioned immunotherapy. It's just, again, part of my philosophy that, for example, one of the most malignant tumor that everybody knows about in the brain is called a glioblastoma. Joe Biden's son died of it. Other famous people have succumbed to this tumor. You get diagnosed with this tumor, and your median survival is 14.5 months. And for a guy like me, that is just absolutely ridiculous. There's got to be something else. There's got to be a different way. So I got very involved in immunotherapy way back when. I mean, I'm talking about the 1990s, where we were taking patients' white blood cells, exposing them to the tumor, having them learn the dendritic cells, having them learn what the tumor looks like, and then re-injecting those cells back into the patient, usually subcutaneously, so that they could actually seek and destroy the cells that they have been exposed to. And I did that in the early stages of immunotherapy, and then I did that later. Just recently, a company called Avita, AIVITA, has a vaccine that is directed toward the stem cell of the tumor cell. So that might be better if you're targeting the stem cell component. You know how these tumors will mutate. They'll mutate and mutate and get around all the treatments. But if you actually were targeting the stem cell, maybe every one of them has a little component of that, so you'd be more successful. So they've had a little success with that as well. But yes, my actual beginnings of going outside the box in neurosurgery were with immunotherapy, with gamma knife, with deep brain stimulation, etc.
Very good. And so let's talk a little bit about Regeneration Biomedical, because you started to go down this path just a minute ago, and I want to
Sure.
give you the opportunity to talk about the technology that you're working on and things like that. But you started the company in 2018. What is its mission? And then tell us more about what it is that you're actually working on.
Okay. So just to reiterate, it comes from my complete disappointment in the field of biopharmaceuticals, where we have not been able to address these diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, even ALS, MS, etc., and that maybe stem cell work would be the way to go. Let's look at Alzheimer's disease, for example. Two new drugs are out right now. One is called donanemab, and that's an Eli Lilly drug, and the other is lecanemab, and that is a Biogen Eisai company drug. And all they are monoclonal antibodies that go in and clean up the amyloid plaques or the amyloid protofibrils, etc. So basically, it's kind of a washing of the brain, a washing out of the brain debris. And this is the old chicken and the egg phenomenon. Which came first? I mean, is it the debris, the buildup of these plaques that are causing the problem, or was the problem before that? And you're just looking at the products of cell death, right?
Mm.
So cleaning up the products of cell death is just not gonna cut it. And so you have to fix the refrigerator, right? You gotta get deeper into it. So that's where my idea was, let's start with stem cells in the brain. Now, Stem cells have been injected intravenously. They've been injected even into the spinal canal, into the spinal cord area, right? The thecal sac. Um, if you inject something into the vein, it's really not going to get its way up into the brain. Okay, there's the blood-brain barrier. There are the
Mhm.
lungs that the venous flow goes to after you inject something intravenously. The cells probably will not propagate much farther than that. They could have a paracrine effect, an effect outside of the cells literally having to get into the brain. They could have some other effect, but um, I wasn't buying it. That's I don't. I'm not buying that. The cells you inject them into the spinal canal. I don't know whether you know about spinal cell flow. Excuse me, spinal fluid flow, but it flows from the bottom of your spine up and around the outside of your brain, and then gets absorbed into the veins, into vascular system. So those cells, even if they made it up against gravity, from being injected down here and not just accumulate at the bottom of your spine, they probably aren't going to get in your brain either. So, what people, a lot of people in your audience don't know is the brain is hollow. The brain is a hollow organ. I tell people it's like a honeydew melon. You cut the melon in half and it's hollow in the middle. Our brains are exactly that way. There are hollow areas in the brain called ventricles. And the ventricles produce cerebrospinal fluid. And cerebrospinal fluid is what you get out of a spinal tap. It's the same fluid that your brain is floating in. Our brains are bobbing in our heads right now. They're in our skull, our brains are just bobbing. We're like in a sack of water. And that fluid, believe it or not, is now being proved to literally wash our brains and clean out the debris on a regular basis. Even more so at night while we're sleeping, apparently. We clean our brains even more, and that's why sleep is important. If you could inject the stem cells into that fluid, perhaps the cells will get into the brain more readily, let's say,
Mm.
a little more easily than if you tried IV. But even beyond that, what's cool about the brain, and this is really the most amazing part, is that every one of us, uh, we all have stem cells sitting in our brains right now. And where do they live? Where are these stem cells in our brain? They're around the ventricles, the
Mm.
hollow cavities. And the areas that the stem cells are in are called the subventricular zone. So, subventricular, under the ventricle. So, if you're inside the ventricle and then you hit the wall of the ventricle and you go through that wall, you're going to be into a zone of a bunch of stem cells. And where do those come from? Those came from embryology when we were little babies. Those stem cells are what formed our brains. And they got up there and then they migrated into the positions they're in. So it's a very fascinating little scene up there. Now, these stem cells are still in us as adult, old human beings. Why don't we use them? What are they doing there? Well, if you look at the research, we've done a lot of research on rats. And, if you're a rat and you can't smell, you're going to die because
Mm.
you're not going to be able to smell your prey and you're not going to be able to smell your food, right? So you're just not going to make it. So rats have evolved a way of replenishing their olfactory neurons, their sense of smell neurons, using their own internal stem cells.
Hmm.
This is well described over the past 10, I'd say 15 years. We've known about this ability of the rat to literally like call on those stem cells. Hey, I need a new sense of smell here. Can you replenish this so I can live longer and survive? So if they can do it, why can't we do it? And the other thing is, why aren't we doing it? I mean, if someone has Alzheimer's disease, why isn't a stem cell fixing the problem?
Mm.
Well, it's my theory that after 60 years, 70 years of age, these stem cells are sitting there. They're tired, they're dormant, they're old. They're not doing much, so they're probably not you. I think we've out evolved our ability to use these. So my theory was if we injected stem cells into the brain, into the ventricles, and they were able to percolate in there and then turn on those other stem cells, then maybe we could wake them up and get them moving and get them helping
Hmm.
to restore a problem. Um, I work with a very famous stem cell expert. His name is Hans Kierstead. He is extremely world famous. He was the father of stem cell technology in America for 30 years. He happens to have a lab about a mile and a half away from here. So he and I have known each other for 20 years. And I said, Hans, does this make any sense to you? He says, yeah, well, we'll use Wnt activated stem cells. And I go, sounds good. What's Wnt?
Right.
So for someone like you, Don, you may know, but I'm just a brain surgeon. I don't know anything about Wnt, and now
No.
I'm like a Wnt expert. So what Wnt is a signaling protein that if we see it on a stem cell expressing Wnt, that stem cell is turned on and has the ability to turn on other stem cells.
Hmm.
Without Wnt expression, the stem cells stay dormant. So if you were to inject Wnt expressing stem cells into the brain, maybe they would percolate into the brain, stimulate the other stem cells to turn each other on, and so forth. That's called the Wnt wave. Kind of like the wave at a football game, where
Right.
people start the wave. That's what happens with the Wnt wave. And some people call it a Wnt cascade.
Hmm.
But these cells are that's their job. That's what Wnt's job is to turn on other stem cells and get them awakened and doing something. So uh, what are we doing when we inject stem cells? And I've done work with pigs, I've done work with animals, smaller animals, and I've done work in humans before the FDA trials. And everything is pointed to this being something of interest.
Hmm.
So that's why I said, I first of all, I have a very nice family. I have a good reputation in my community. I'm well respected here. I have very good, reviews on Google. You don't want to ruin this with snake oil and something crazy. So the only way to legitimize this is to go through the FDA. So we presented our work, we presented our research to the FDA. The FDA said, "No, we want you to do the work on pigs first." So I literally went down to a vivarium in San Diego and operated on 14 Yucatan pigs that are, 90 pounds, and put reservoirs in their head. And that's, by the way, how we're injecting the cells. We put a little port under the scalp, and that tube goes into the brain through the skull, into the brain, into that ventricle, into that hollow cavity, and we can tap that port
Hmm.
anytime. No one sees it. It's under the skin. It's invisible, but it's very modern. It's very kind of disruptive type of technology. But I mean, if Elon Musk can have little electrodes sticking out of people's heads, we can have a little port underneath the skin.
Right.
But and by the way, all of these stem cells are from the patient themselves. These are not off the shelf stem cells. And that to me did not make any sense either. You take somebody else's stem cells, you inject them into the brain. I mean, my gosh, it's going to be a graft versus host reaction. You're going to have some sort of allergic reaction to them, and it's just not going to be good. You'll have some inflammatory response.
Hmm.
So off the shelf, not good right away. I mean, maybe in the future we can figure that out. How about things like exosomes and other things? We can get there. But I figured the FDA would be okay if we took the patient's own fat from the same patient, grew those cells in culture, selected them for their expression of Wnt, and then used that as the pharmaceutical to inject into the brain. So that is the invention. We're the first in the world to do it. There's no one who's ever done this before. And if you look out there right now we have almost zero competitors. So it's a very novel approach, but it's something that needs to be tested.
Mhm.
So we got approval for a phase 1 trial from the FDA.
Very good. Yeah, so I mean, I learned 2 things today. One, so I've seen CSF pulsing inside of the brain before, to know that it's circulated, in part by just all the things that move around in your body, by the blood moving and everything else moving. The CSF moves in a similar sort of fashion, but I
Mhm.
had no idea that the ventricles in your head produce the CSF. That was a brand new one for me, not as a
Mhm.
medical student.
Yeah, right.
And then the second one for me is these Wnt expressing stem cells. For me, it's a brand new term. Haven't heard before, but thank you
Yeah,
for sharing that.
my
Um,
pleasure. Yeah.
so whenever you put the port in the head, how long is the patient, how long do they have to have the port in their head?
So at this point, theoretically, forever,
Hmm.
right? So the port does a lot of things. First of all, if it serves as the source of the injection, okay, and in the phase 1 trial, we've injected 7 patients so far. So we already have experience with this. Over about a year and 4 months, we've been doing this. And their safety profile is extraordinary.
Hmm.
We have had the patients don't even get a headache when their stem cells are injected through this port. I'm not kidding. We have to report all this to the FDA. So that's great. We've had no adverse events either. We've had no anaphylaxis. We've had no side effects to report. Knock on wood. I'm knocking on wood. But uh, we also have been looking at secondary endpoints. Whenever you do a phase 1, it's a safety trial, and so far it's been extremely safe. But do you have any inclination that it's working? So of course, all researchers look at their phase 1, and they have all sorts of secondary endpoints, like in the case of Alzheimer's disease, cognition, um, amyloid plaque reduction, phosphorylated tau reduction, etc. Activities of daily living, things like that. And so far, and I'm not allowed to say any forward-making statements, but so far we've had 4 out of our first 5 patients had improvement in their cognition, and there have not been any reports of really improved cognition in the other 2 drugs from Eli Lilly or Biogen or uh, uh, Lilly. So their progression, the disease still goes downhill. Your cognition still goes downhill, but it goes down slower than placebo.
Hmm.
We've actually seen, some patients improve. We've also seen an improvement in the amyloid plaque um, uh, volumes as well. We've seen improvements in phosphorylated tau, which those 2 drugs from those 2 companies do not target at all. I mean, they're only targeting amyloid beta. They're not targeting phosphorylated tau. And these diseases, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, Alzheimer's, these are tau misfolding diseases. So for us to address this as well as all in one injection, we're addressing multiple things. So it's fascinating. So we are literally, Don, waiting to submit our phase 2 protocol to the FDA. It is actually in our hands right now, and we'll be bringing it to the FDA probably at the end of this month, July. So it's very exciting times. And we're hoping to get a green light from them to move on to a phase 2 study, which will involve serial injections. So, where the phase 1 was a single injection, just a test for safety, following the patients for a long time, um, now we're going to start giving injections every 2 months.
Wow.
So they'll get a single liposuction, which will last for a year, 2 years, and every 2 months they'll get an injection for up to 1 year, and then we'll reassess.
Oh,
And
good.
it'll be a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. It'll be multi-institution. So far, we're looking at 5 institutions total to do this, and all we need is 110 patients statistically to get this through. It'll be very exciting times, and I'm hoping that we'll see some of the results we've seen in phase 1.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's so sad to see a loved one continue to slip away with Alzheimer's. I've not lived with somebody with Parkinson's, but certainly from the outside, it looks similar.
Yeah.
It is such a sad thing to see, and to know that there, potentially could be, a treatment on the horizon is a very positive thing as well.
Yeah, yeah. So, and that's exactly my philosophy. Now, we do this with Alzheimer's disease. Believe me, we'll use the same stem cell preparation for ALS,
Mm.
for chronic traumatic encephalopathy. I'm actually already talking to some people within the NFL to see if we can get a study going on and see if we can get some funding for it, some real grant money from the NFL. I mean, uh, I'm on the board of Lee Steinberg's foundation, and I think people know who Lee Steinberg is. He is the original Jerry Maguire, the one who the movie was made about. And Lee is a big proponent of giving everything back to these athletes as much as we can. So he's very interested in our work right now, and we're going to try and get in front of a lot of these owners of the football teams to belly up some money for grant money.
So important. I mean, it's one of these things where, I frequently have said on recent shows as well, that if the government's not funding, future research, especially outside of cancer, then you have to think, how are these things going to come about? And it's going to be through, other methods of finding grants as well.
Yeah, that is true. So that's why we formed Regeneration Biomedical in the first place, right? It was for funding. I mean, when
Mhm.
you do a phase 1 trial, the patents, the research, the legal, the paying the hospital to perform all the tests. I mean, it's astronomical. So that's how we funded it. So we have stockholders in Regeneration Biomedical. We finished a Series A round of funding, and we're now going to a Series B round to fund the phase 2.
So critical. So how do you see stem cell treatments evolving in the future? I mean, what do you um, see for the future for um, all things like Alzheimer's, but also what sort of challenges are you facing in this area?
So I think the where this is going to pan out is autologous versus allogeneic. Okay, first of all, because everybody wants to be able to grab something that's pre-made off the shelf, and there's no question. My technique, or our technique in the company, is a little labor intensive. You got to get a liposuction. So you're a patient with Alzheimer's disease. You need to get a liposuction. You need to wait 2 weeks, and then you need a hole drilled in your head and this little port put in. The liposuction takes 15 minutes. This procedure, believe it or not, takes about 10 minutes to do. It's not that intensive. And then you have to wait another 3 weeks until your cells are ready to be injected in. I do tell people, though, everybody's familiar with what a portacath is, the little
Hmm.
port that you get into your subclavian vein underneath your collarbone. Putting a port in the brain is 7 times less risky than
Mm.
doing one of
Wow.
these. This has far more complications potential than this. And there's a lot of reasons why. But I mean, you could drop a lung doing this. You need to maintain it. You have to give heparin into it so it doesn't clot off. This is going into nice, clear, crystal spring water. So it's really, It's really very clean and very nice. So, and it can be used over and over and over for the life of the patient. And let's say we needed to draw off fluid. Let's say we wanted to test the fluid. So you could just put a needle in there instead of doing a spinal tap. So that's really a big bonus there.
Very good. And then you're also involved in the surgical management of movement disorders. What are some of the advancements and then challenges in that field?
Well, I think like I said, the biggest advances in that field are, you know, right now they're in the stimulation world, but we're hoping to bring the stem cells into that world. And to be honest with you, Michael J. Fox has not had a stimulator placed yet, and they've been out for 28 years. So my first deep brain stimulation implant was 28 years ago, and I was one of the first in the country to do it. But since that time, it's evolved, it's gotten a lot better, but Michael J. Fox has been waiting for really, I think, something like stem cells to really
Mm,
get to the heart of the problem. And we are definitely going there with the proper funding and with the proper grants or whatever. That is one of our next iterations. And so, with regard to that, the advancement in something like Parkinson's disease, I think the stimulation is going to become more and more AI, more and more artificially intelligent. But those little electrodes that are in there, they're not fixing the refrigerator.
right.
They're 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 helping symptoms. They are, modulating the disease and modulating the symptoms, but they're not really getting to the source of the problem. So that's what we really need. That's where we really need to go. And I mean, there is genetic stuff going. I mean, we all know about, alpha synuclein, and we all know about these various genetic aspects. But how are we going to manipulate those, and how are you going to fix everything that's already broken? So, ergo the stem cells again. So I think that you're going to see more and more stem cell work done in the future. I will tell you, I think we're going to be paving a little bit of this path because people are going to start wanting to inject into the brain after they see our work for any number of things, to be honest with you. But let's let the FDA clear us for the ultimate use, and I'm all for that, and I think it's the way to go. But I think it's an area that is going to evolve. And it's an area of personalized medicine, Don. I mean, personalized medicine is becoming more and more, it's more of a catch term now than it ever used to be. It's kind of a very sexy approach to disease, using the patient's own immune system or using the patient's own stem cells or using, data from the molecular makeup of their tumor or targeting certain proteins that are expressed on their tumor cells. I mean, all of this is in the realm of personalized medicine, and we are frankly the epitome of it. We're taking stem cells out of the same person, modifying them a bit, but maintaining them in their almost purest form, uh, without actually using any genetic changes, no plasmids, no gene changes, nothing. And we're not even adding that Wnt expression to them. We're finding the cells that are already expressing the Wnt
Mm.
and then using those cells. So we're not genetically modifying. This is non-GMO. And
Right.
what we're doing is non-GMO, and it seems to be the proper beginning of stem cell use, at least in the brain. And I, can't wait to see where it goes. It's just very exciting.
I hear a lot of the same thing whenever it comes to like the next generation of cancer therapies, right? So between CAR T
Right.
cell
Right.
therapies or, natural killer cell therapies, they're all sort of, targeting these same sort of things. They pull something out of you, refine it, grow it, put it back in you, but it's much more targeted towards the actual delivery
Absolutely.
of the mechanism as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, last few questions here. What's the greatest piece of leadership advice that you've ever received?
That I have ever received? I would say it was probably from my mentor, Dade Lunsford, who really just thought outside the box uh, and realized that there was a technology that could change all of neurosurgery. And he went to Sweden to train on it, and he brought the first Gamma knife over to America in 1986.
Hmm.
And it was pretty much his entire doing that brought that technology to America. And now we're using stereotactic radiosurgery on a regular basis. So that role model of thinking outside the box, putting your nose on the grindstone, doing it yourself, getting the background and the training to become expert at something, and making it come to fruition, all of that is what really turned me on to that type of mentality. Now, I will tell you, I think you have to have a little of it inside you to begin with. I'm sure we can learn a lot of things, but you have to be that personality. Um, there are plenty of people that are just happy, reading about something in a book and just making that happen. But if you're really a hands-on person making things go, that is probably my greatest learning experience was that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I couldn't agree more. What inspires you?
Well, I went into this field literally to help people, and I'm in my senior years of being in this field, and it still thrills me to do a surgery in the brain. Patient is done with the surgery and they're doing great and they're very gracious and happy, and the families kissing each other and hugging each other, and you come out and it's just why you're doing this. It's a very not everybody gets that feeling. It's a very gratifying job. Yeah, we have our difficulties. We've got legal issues. We've got financial things going on in medicine now. But the essence of it, of still taking care of patients and curing diseases, is the nature of the whole beast. And I come home after a day of surgery. I'll do 3 days ago. I did four surgeries in a row, and all of them were doing great. And it just makes you feel good at the end of the day. So it's a very gratifying field. So the mission, what excites me is patients doing better and keeping people alive. And you know what? You get a disease like a brain tumor or Alzheimer's disease or something like that, your world is turned upside down. The family's world is turned upside down. Everybody lives in our little, private Idaho of happiness. And then you get one problem, one cancer, one Alzheimer's patient, and it rocks the boat. And you just got to deal with that. And I'm happy that I'm on one side of that, dealing with helping the people get through it.
Very good. What concerns you?
What concerns me? I'm the field of medicine is actually, I'm not too worried about it. And the reason I'm not that worried about it, I was worried about it for a while, because I'm saying to myself, why would kids go into this anymore? Because it's a brutal life. I mean, I work 100, maybe 80 hours a week. Just ask my wife. And a lot of kids today, they're into instant gratification. They don't like putting their nose to the grindstone. It's a little difficult for them to actually swallow that. Now, they have 80-hour work weeks now in training, so that's good. That was a big change, down from about 110.
Mm.
But that concerned me that we were going to get a a decline in kids really caring about going into medicine. But you know what's interesting? I mean, the medical schools are impossible to get into now. It's a very desirable field, so it's not as big a concern. I think my concern is overall getting access, giving access to patients. I mean, contrary to popular belief, every single human being gets access to medical care here. Okay, if you're an undocumented citizen, if you're out of the country, coming from out of the country, and you come into our emergency room, Dr. Duma will be taking care of you. Okay,
Mhm.
because I'm covering the ER that night. We will all take care of everybody, and it's in our Hippocratic oath to do so. So I'm not too worried about uh, people not getting care. There is concern about people being in underserved areas. You know, if you're in the middle of a very underserved area, yeah, you'll have to be helicoptered somewhere. But we're still way better than most, you know, non-United States countries. We're doing very well.
Yeah.
So, and as far as what am I concerned about, I don't want to go that deep. There's a lot to be concerned about in this world today.
Yes, I agree with that end statement for sure, that there is a lot to be concerned about. Don't want it to turn into a therapy session at all. So,
Right, right, right. Very
last
good.
question, and you might have answered this already, but what excites you?
Innovation, stepping outside the box, thinking for myself, uh, testing things myself. I'm not, it's not like I don't trust other methods, but I'd like to test them myself.
Mhm.
You know, I have always had that philosophy of thinking outside the box, thinking of something new, and then testing it and seeing how these things work out. So that's what excites me. I have other things in my world. I'm a musician. I play piano. I'm in a rock band. I play golf. I, do other things though. Those that excite me. My three boys are exciting enough. Two of them are out of college. One is still in college, but doing amazingly well. So, and my family life is fabulous. So, those things excite me too.
Exciting times for sure. Well, Dr. Christopher Duma, thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success podcast and for telling us about Regeneration Biomedical and the great work that you're doing there. I look forward to hearing more as you progress.
Yeah, stay tuned. It should be an interesting ride.
Yes, also true. Take care.